Hi, hello everyone. Firstly, I would like to say happy Friday, everyone. Thanks for dedicating your time on a Friday to our VCTV. So this is VCTV, the Venture Capital TV from LATOKEN, where we connect founders with startups like yourself. Myself, Sunny Mohanty, I'm the Regional Director of LATOKEN based here in Singapore. I welcome you, all of you speakers, again to our show. So today's topic is very much something that is need of the hour, considering the situation we are going through, the crisis that we are going through. It's about green energy, investments into green energy, and sustainable energy as well. I'd like to start with a small speech about sustainability. Investing sustainably means putting your money to work on issues ranging from adapting to and mitigating climate change, improving working conditions and diversity, to tackling inequality. More and more investors want to invest sustainably. They want to combine investing for a financial return as well, with a positive contribution to the environment, society, and both. So that's the topic that we're going to cover. That's a broad topic. So we start the show with a short introduction about each of the speakers who are also investors in the space. Then I go around asking questions related to investments in the space. I would like to start with our very newest speakers who've just joined today on the show. I would start with somebody who is very close to me in the region first. Then I'll move further west. Hi, Sajid. Welcome to VCTV. We have Sajid Rahman from Indonesia. Sajid, please help introduce yourself to our audience. A short intro, and we go from there. Thank you.
Thanks, Ani. So I wear many hats. One is building a digital health business, which is essentially serving 8 million people digitally, and of course, very relevant to what in the current scenario. Second hat is I'm an investor in tech companies. I invest in tech companies across the world. Many of them are focused on renewable energy, sustainability, and environment. And the third is wearing a hat where I'm building a wind turbine project in Bangladesh. So these are the three hats.
Excellent. Wow. We'd like to know about the wind turbine project in Bangladesh. Thank you so much for that. So the next speaker who is also here for the first time is Orne. Hi, Orne, from all the way from London. Hi, how are you?
Yeah, hi and hello, everybody. I'm Arne from the Environmental Technologies Fund. I'm a partner here. We're a venture capital fund investing all over Europe in companies that, as the name suggests, invest in or develop and commercialize technologies that produce a significant environmental impact. We've been doing this for over 15 years now, and yeah, one of the larger players, I would say, in Europe, in the European ecosystem.
Excellent. Welcome, Orne. We'd like to know your perspectives from the European, perspective as well. Mm-hmm. And last but not least, I have my friend Natasha, who has been a regular speaker on the show. Hi, Natasha. Happy Friday. How are you? Welcome back.
Hi, Sony. It's a pleasure always to be a part of your webinars, and yeah, happy Friday to everyone. So I am, introduction. Yes, of course. I am the co-founder and partner of Venture Gurukul Capability Fund. It's a Security and Exchange Board of India registered Category 1 fund focused on early stage investments in India. As an early stage investor, we are pretty sector agnostic. And we believe in investing in ventures which are bringing in digital transformation of day-to-day transactions of consumers and businesses, which becomes even more important in this post-pandemic new normal economy. So that's us.
Great, welcome. So Natasha is based in Delhi, in India.
That's right.
Yeah. Thank you. So we are all set. Thanks for all those introductions. Now I know who covers what area and sector. So Orne, because we had a little bit of discussion before you actually came to our live show, that you primarily and only invest into sustainability. We would like to start with you to give a higher perspective, a broader perspective on what is sustainability in your terms, and what investments have you done in the present, like last 3 months, into the space. Thank you.
Yeah, so let me explain a little bit what we mean with sustainability. We specifically focus on sustainability through innovation. So these are innovations that make the world more sustainable. Sustainable being more environmentally friendly. We've been doing this for 15 years, and what this really means has been changing over time. So 15 years ago, it was all about solar cells and biofuels, and a few other areas, but it was basically building up that initial infrastructure around making things greener. Then the financial crisis hit, and the emphasis shifted from that to more resource efficiency type topics. So that's when light emitting diodes, LED lighting became popular, those sorts of things. Generally, the topic of becoming more sustainable got a bit into the background because people were so busy with dealing with the crisis. So then coming out of the financial crisis, people realized that actually a lot of these environmental topics are the future, are changing the way certain industries are operating, and more incumbents, more and more large industrial players started to realize that. So from the automotive industry to the electricity industry, even chemicals, e-commerce, et cetera, they all started to realize, okay, we need to do things differently. And so what happened is that these industrial sectors that were before, in effect, trying to avoid becoming more sustainable, to put it bluntly, were now engaging with the topic. So that accelerated that topic a lot. 2-3 years ago, you saw all the oil and gas companies joining that and calling us up, quite frankly, asking, how do we do this? How do we become more sustainable? How can we enter other areas in oil and gas? So this whole topic came there. And the really interesting thing that's happening now is that this time around, the crisis is not slowing it down, but it's accelerating it. This crisis is a very different one from the financial crisis 10 years ago, in that it makes people work from home, it makes people use video conferencing, avoiding long distance travel, question the way they live, going back to home cooking, et cetera, et cetera. So it actually plays into the hands of the sustainability topic. So we're very optimistic as an organization, having been through the ups and downs of this area, that we're now really entering the mainstream. So we're seeing this as a mainstream trend that's not isolated to a few sectors, but it's going across the entire economy. And we find that in our own investment activities, where we're seeing that we're investing in sectors that we might not have looked at before. For example, we invested in a company in the data center industry, because the data center industry has just realized that it is using a lot of electricity and that is not sustainable anymore. It has also just realized that all that electricity is being converted to heat, which is blown into the air in the usual data center. Can't we do something useful with that heat? So all of a sudden you have a crossover between the energy industry and the data center or IT industry, which you didn't have 2 or 3 years ago. Yeah. And so those are the opportunities we get really excited about, because those are two giant markets that are starting to merge or to touch each other.
Yeah, because talking about data centers, I live in Singapore and I've visited 2 data centers here. Like, they're very huge, noisy, and a lot of electricity, and they're like 24/7 up because of the service they provide. I mean, that's something absolutely, that to be looked into, and you're doing a fabulous job into that. Great. Thanks for those insights. I'll come to you with asking more details after I've spoken with other speakers. So next, I'd like to ask Sajid, because Sajid, I see like your social media is just blowing out of proportion. You are speaking at every single webinar, and you are globally traveled. I mean, I couldn't find a place that you haven't been to. So tell our speakers, tell our audience the kind of investments that you've made in recent times, and what are you currently focusing on in terms of investments as well? Thank you.
So actually, on the investment side, I have actually doing more investments now than I was doing before, given the whole COVID-19 situation, which is sort of against the trend. But the reason I'm doing this is two. One is if the company is raising the fund now, it's very likely they will have a run rate or runway of, let's say, 1 to 2 years, which hopefully by the time we'll be out of this crisis. And second, of course, founders who are raising now are the real ones, right? So they're not here. They know they're into the hard slog and they're ready to take that challenge. So my investments, I do invest a lot. I did around more than 500 investments across the world, mostly in Silicon Valley, but around 100 would be the rest of the world, i.e. Latin, Africa, and all over the places. So I'll pick a couple of which is probably relevant to today's topic. One is investment that I'm doing now is called Free Will. So Free Will is a very interesting concept. So they are using a private portable identity. So one of the big challenges that is now very clear globally is that a rapid testing and a regular testing might be the way out to open up the economy. So they're building based on an Ethereum blockchain identity that so everyone will probably spit in a cup and get the COVID-19 test, upload it, and so that will become the entry point, anyone going into office or entering a large audience and stuff like that. So that's something which is probably relevant to the topic. The other one, which is working, of course, is artificial leather. So we all know that one of the big reasons of carbon emission in the world is farming. So whether it's meat or the leather that we use for bags and all this stuff. So there are a lot of companies which are building artificial meat. Either it's a cellular technology or a plant-based. And then there are companies, this is a specific company which is using their own way of building artificial leather, which is as good as they claim, like the one you see in Louis Vuitton bags and stuff like that. So that's the whole idea, to replace this whole leather thing. The other third thing that we are seeing a lot happening in the current environment is remote working, right? So exactly the thing that is happening now. So I've done investment in companies in this space, which is replicating a convention or conference remotely. So one of the challenges of having a conference or convention is that you can have all discussions and then you usually go to separate rooms, more of a networking and other stuff like that. So this company has rebuilt the whole thing virtually, which you can have a conference with probably 100 people or 200 people, and the speaker can go to table, speaking with 5-10 people and stuff like that. So these would be the three examples.
Oh, wow. Excellent. Well, I would come more to ask questions on the leather, the project that you mentioned, to understand more about it. Thank you so much, Sajid. And welcome to VCTV. And now we have our dear friend, Natasha. And hi, Natasha, please tell us about your recent investments for those who actually haven't heard from you from the last sessions.
I think from the perspective of the current pandemic and from a perspective of investments, the issue of ESG, which is environmental, society, and governance, these sort of standards, especially a lot of increasingly VCs and GPs across the world, which are paying attention to more value-driven investment around high ESG standards among their portfolio company. So beyond just climate change, right now, the change which we are seeing is this, the millennials, right? The products and services which they are consuming, they're increasingly becoming quite focused towards ESG. And that's not just towards positive impact towards the environment and reduction in carbon emission, but there are a lot of global issues, like there's a lot of racial inequality, there's gender biasness, and a number of people who are getting jobs in white collar spaces. And the pandemic has highlighted these issues, as we can see the Black Lives Matter movement, the momentum which has gained not just in US but all over the world, not just from a that's equality from a racial perspective, but from a gender perspective. Increasingly, these issues have become very important to the consumers, millennials of today, and even the Generation Z of today, right? So as this becomes important in a portfolio level perspective, as the consumers start paying more and more attention towards this, even VCs who are committed towards these high ESG standards amongst the portfolio companies are becoming important. And more importantly, the LPs now, like a survey done across LPs all over the world revealed that more than 60% prefer investing in funds which are committed to high ESG standards among their portfolio companies. So increasingly, because of this pandemic, we're seeing this accelerated change towards high standards of this reporting. So this doesn't really mean that if you are be focused towards clean energy, so everyone who is at any particular sector, these are the sort of benchmarks, qualitative benchmarks, which a lot of VC funds are increasingly getting focused towards. And even we as a fund embrace this and inculcate that as a part of our LP reporting. So these are the current investment trends which we're seeing from a sustainability perspective, which has become even more important in the pandemic.
Yeah, I agree. I agree to those points. I was just looking at your website today and very fascinated to see your road shows into China. Hope they're going to happen soon. Thank you.
Yeah.
Natasha. So I'd like to come back to on a more specific sort of question, like, so what were the best practices or that decisions that you had to make during this time, like, in the last 6 months, before you thought of qualifying a startup for investing?
So you mean with regards to new investments or with regards to our existing portfolio?
Can you tell us both?
Yeah. Okay.
I think existing is easier, but new, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, let's start with the existing portfolio. So, our job is not done when we invest in companies. Our job, in a way, just starts when we invest in new companies, because we're supporting the companies as they grow, as they develop. Especially in times like the last 6 months, which were very difficult for a lot of these companies. And so for us, it's then our role to bring our experience to bear from the last financial crisis, from seeing hundreds and hundreds of startups, on how to deal with that, how to deal with if your revenues collapse, if you get cost pressures, you can't go to the office anymore, your suppliers can't deliver anymore, etc., etc. So we try to help our companies through that, and that's partly through enabling financing from us or from other people, and partly through operational advice. So this has been very, very intense. I wouldn't have expected that I can be so stressed out at home, sitting at home in my living room, working from there. But there was a lot of intense work to do, even though it was working from home. On the new investment side, we did not stop. We did do 3 investments, wow. Which is, if you compare that to our usual run rate of about 5 per year, we did 3 during the lockdown. So we basically kept our speed up. And we moved our style of working, obviously, online. And that worked surprisingly well. So once you've met people once or twice, which we could do, we meet in the park and go for a walk together, you can actually do most things online. And so we more or less continued business as usual. And we found great opportunities in that environment.
So you closed 3 investments, new investments during the pandemic.
Yeah.
And they were all made on the Zoom calls.
Mostly, yeah. So the due diligence, contract negotiations, all of that was done by Zoom calls.
Fantastic. And did you meet these startups or founders back ever in person?
We did. So we did meet all of them at some point.
At some point. But the investments were made.
But one team we met on the balcony of one of our partners' flats, because you had the social distancing, and the rest of the interactions were online, and it worked okay. It worked okay. Yeah.
Okay, balcony, negotiating term sheet and.
Yeah. We can do that. We can do that in the summer. In the winter, it might get harder, but for now it was okay.
That was funny. But anyways, I mean, that's awesome to know. Like, 3 deals during the pandemic last 6 months. Awesome. Thank you, Ani, for sharing those. Founders, those who are listening, who are in the sustainability area in Europe, you know the man who's already just invested in 3 and looking for more. It doesn't stop. Thank you. I mean, that's about, passion that you have. Okay, thank you. I mean, Sajid, I mean, the same question. I'm sure you are also serial investor. So tell me some of the examples that you of investment that you did specifically, and what were the decisions, like what were you thinking? What were the best practices that you followed or kept in mind while you were investing during these difficult times?
So, if you look at all the companies that are coming up for investments, you can put them into 3 categories. The first sort of companies would have been dying or would have been dead in any case. What COVID-19 has done is accelerating that demise, right? So companies, their model was wrong. They were, because there were enough VC money out there, they were into that loop of funding raise, but they were continuing. And if you look some of the large companies like Brook Brothers of the world, which are closing shops, is because those models are not very sustainable. And COVID-19 just pushed them out, right? So that's the one bucket. The second bucket of company have a very strong business model. They have done very well, but because of this COVID-19, they have, it's a force that no one anticipated, and they're just out of the kilter, right? So Airbnbs of the world, big travel companies of the world who probably have a good model, and then they are raising funds to at least continue this whole things that they're going through. Then the third group of company are actually having the wind at their back. These are the e-commerce of the companies. You have seen that how e-commerce adoption has almost doubled in past 3-4 months compared to the last 10-15 years, or remote working companies or cloud companies, because everyone using technology much more. So these are the third bracket of companies. So my investment mostly has been on the third bracket or in the second bracket, but mostly in the third bracket, because the way it works is that I believe, and others may agree or not, but I think the behavior change that is happening during this phase, while it will not continue at 100%, but a lot of that will remain and part of the way we work and think and act. I mean, you could see that already, a lot of companies are going to work remotely for the next 2-3 years, and a lot of these trends will continue. Whether EdTech will continue the same space or at the same, speed may not, but I think a lot of these changes will take place. Same in health tech and other space. So I'm mostly investing in this space. All the deals, are not, obviously our check size is very small. So, we don't do the level of due diligence that probably, others would do. But of course, it is all done remotely. Zoom calls and phone discussions and stuff like that. One thing, of course, the one thing I do is I usually invest in companies where there are very good, strong references. So, someone who knew the founder or who had been sitting at the board of the company. So those checks are there.
And these are completely new startups, are not existing portfolio.
Yeah. I mean, so an existing portfolio, there are some, some top ups and stuff. So they're raising new rounds, yes. But yeah, the one I just mentioned are mostly the new startups who are raising either. So we are seeing a trend. We are seeing a lot of extension, right? So those who raise seed now raising seed plus, or those who has raised Series A are raising Series A plus. So they're all raising extension to continue the long runway. So these would be mostly seed or Series A deals. So
because you touched upon education tech, I live in Singapore. I see that all the colleges, all the private colleges are, schools and colleges, they've started opening up. I mean, children are going back to schools. Is it the same situation in Indonesia?
Not yet. So Indonesian government has not allowed schools to open up. So everything is happening remotely. And so what's happened is, if you see a couple of countries which opened up school, like New Zealand and others, then the surge of vaccine, the surge of virus happened, and they again shut down the schools. So it will be a open shut case. No one has yet found the formula of really opening up the school in a proper way. And if you look at universities where the college stay, the college town. So if you're opening up a university, you have professors who are not very young. So they will be in contact with the students. Most of the universities have a college town, so these students will go out and meet the people in the college town. So there are a lot of nuances in the whole thing.
Yeah, there are a lot of risks, as you rightly said. The professors obviously are elderly people, and we should be very careful with that. Okay, I think EdTech has a big future. Thanks, thank you, Sajid. Natasha, just tell us, like, any particular example that you would like to share in terms of investment of a startup that you've done in just last few months, 3 to 6 months, and what were the decisions, or what was your thought process behind investing? Either, I mean, if I remember correctly, you do early stage investment, right?
Yes, right. Yeah.
Yeah. Please share your,
So, I think I've shared my views earlier about our investment preferences during the pandemic. So yeah, we have invested during this time, but rightfully most of those investments have been follow-on round of investments in our own portfolio company. As you can imagine, the current pandemic has really been very unpredictable for everyone, right? And what most startups thought they would take to achieve those timelines have been delayed, and ideally a lot of them require capital to achieve that particular X amount or X milestone during a longer duration. And of course, there are larger cost implications of working remotely and managing your team remotely. So, there have been a lot of follow-on rounds which we have participated. And what I think even Sajid highlighted earlier is what becomes important is this pandemic has shaken up everyone, right? And those businesses which, as it is, were not doing well before the pandemic, have just become obsolete. And a lot of them, this is a good reason for them to shut and blame it on the pandemic, right? But for the others, right, which especially companies which have been generating cash flows, because that's become really important in times like these. As tech investor, you're always very valuation driven and numbers driven, despite the fact is if it does or doesn't add to the revenue or the top line, right? A number of eyeballs which your app has, a number of users, the user retention ratio, these sort of things have taken a slight backseat. And what's become more important is the customer lifetime value, the customer stickiness, and the opportunity from a monetization perspective, right? Because that's become increasingly important in times like these. And these sort of matrices become quite important when you're evaluating your follow-on round of investments. What is the cash the business is generating? And that's become increasingly important. So that's been one. And since we are talking from a sustainability, green energy perspective in the webinar, I'd just like to highlight. So as a VC investor, like I earlier mentioned, we look at ESG governance standards, high governance standards, which are reported to our LPs. So if I could just share an example. So one of our companies is called Home Capital. They're based out of India, of course, and their unique positioning is to provide 0% down payment financing for first-time home buyers. And they have an excellent revenue model around the same, which of course I'll not share because of various confidentiality reasons. And so for a company like that, right, in a country like India, where the housing ownership is very poor, right? And mostly housing is an asset which is passed from generation to generation, right? So very few people actually own their houses, and a lot of them rent it out. And that's why the government even is focused on something like affordable housing, right? So this particular startup focuses excessively on providing credit to people for affordable housing. And people for affordable housing, the sort of users who buy affordable housing, they don't have any credit rating whatsoever, right? So how do you lend to these guys who don't have typical bank grade or CIBIL, as you like to call it, typical CIBIL investment grade credit score, right? So that's where your digital analytics from your consumer data behavior from your mobile phones become important. The opportunity of you be able to generate revenues on a monthly basis becomes important, right? So that's where the digital disruption lies. And more importantly, creating a platform where banks have seamless access to these users. Otherwise, even though the banks are mandated by the government because of the government's perspective of housing for all to reach out to these users, banks have not been able to reach out to these users simply because lack of accessibility to reach out to the right users. So providing that digital platform where you have the real estate developer on one side and you have the lenders on the other side is a seamless platform which is being provided by them. So for a company like that, so number of houses which are being offered to first-time house buyers becomes increasingly important, and that's something which is a big value add from a ESG perspective, right? You're giving credit to someone who's never had this access, and you're giving a house to someone who's the first-time house homeowner, right? So these sort of standards become very interesting and attractive for our investors, our LPs. And the other one I can think of is BOPR,
Okay,
right?
I've got a question about that housing, that you mentioned, because something that I haven't heard about it from an India perspective, at least, because when, well, I am a non-residential Indian. So for me, it's like I have these, those real estate properties representatives coming overseas to be it Singapore or UK, selling like houses, selling condominiums, the premium ones. So my idea of investment into India has been that I would like to know what class of people that are actually the first-time buyers of these affordable houses that do not have a bank account or credit history.
No, they're underbanked.
They're underbanked. Okay.
Yeah, right. So,
Right.
so this is typically, you could say, affordable housing would be houses which come for 30 lakhs, which is around 300 million. Am I right in saying that? Or 30, I can't put the right decimal for international, but 30 lakhs per house. So you can sort of imagine, but still, for someone who doesn't really have a credit score, right, but are generating revenue. So these could be your migrant laborers who come over here, they get some sort of a blue collar job, they are security guards or something. So they have a steady income which comes in, but don't really have that sort of 600 or 700 plus CIBIL score to be able to get them the banking assistance they require for a house loan, right? So that's why the government has mandated specifically for these banks, they have quotas where they have to lend to affordable housing as per the government policy of housing for all. But banks find it hard to reach out to these guys because these are not the typical users of a bank, right? Yeah. This is something which microfinance institution is able to reach out to very seamlessly. So that's where the tech opportunity of providing this seamless platform becomes very attractive.
Right. That's very interesting. Okay, what's your second one? Sorry, you're about to share.
Yeah, so this is about providing waterless car wash solutions as a professional service for daily car washing. So in India, you have bucket water sort of solution, or even they use a pipe hose to clean their cars on a daily basis, right? Which is being provided by people on a part-time basis, may it be security guards or others, right? But there's not an opportunity to provide professional services of waterless car wash. And with this sort of a waterless car wash solution, you're basically cleaning your entire car in 250 ml of water. Oh, right? Wow. So you can imagine a bucket of water, 60 liters versus 250 ml. So the amount of water saving you are doing, so to measure that, to report that, so that's a big value add for our investors from a ESG investment standard perspective.
Okay. So what do you use? What do they use to wash these cars?
It's a solution. It's a waterless car wash solution. You put a little bit of the solution with 250 ml of water, you spray it around, and you can wipe it with a microfiber cloth, and it's pretty good. And it's very good for the cars because it doesn't cause any sort of scratching on the car. So the exteriors of the cars remain scratch free for a longer time, rather than you have this bucket water which is being circulated amongst some 50 cars. All of them are being washed with the same water and the same cloth. So it's hygienic as well.
Intelligent, smart investment, considering India, remember, such polluted, a lot of pollution all the time, and you need to wash your car every day.
Yeah, and we are not impact investors. So this is the sort of ESG reporting standards, like, with one wash, you can save so many liters of water. So we're doing this on a regular basis as a service to a consumer at their doorstep. So that adds up to a lot. And that becomes important as we are moving towards a more conscious, consumers are getting very conscious of all these things, and from an environment perspective. But so this is a sort of opportunity, a value-added opportunity which is provided to them. And yeah, of course, if it's highlighted to the consumer, then they're more than happy to take it up.
Great, thank you. I was so intrigued and engrossed in your speech. Thank you. Orne, hi. Hi, sorry, I thought probably I lost you. Now you're back. I've got a question for you. I would like to know from you, either from your portfolio, I think from your portfolio company, if a startup who managed to pivot or moves very fast to another area because they were very affected by the pandemic. Like, for example, Airbnb, like, likes of Airbnb or the travel industry, anybody, sustainable, but everything to do with sustainability. They were, because they had the technology, they had the clients, they had the user base, and they had the money from you, and they managed to move to another, sort of sector or another space. You're on mute.
I have to apologize. We had a power outage here, which which one of the topics I could talk about is how they are fearing power outages in the UK because of all the renewable energy,
oh my God.
which messes up the electricity grid.
Right? Power outages usually happens because I'm Indian, so I know we have power outages in India. I used to, UK.
Exactly. So no, that's an interesting topic. But let me answer your question first. We have a company, seeing the opportunity in the new environment can pay off. So we have a company called Zelo, which is essentially it's a platform for bus trips. But for bus trips, not on a regular basis like normal commuter buses, but for bus trips that are sort of changing all the time. Yeah? And so they, for example, organize buses for British people to go to the Champions League game in Barcelona. Right?
Okay.
And they work with, so they do all kinds of things like that. They also work a lot with large corporates that have offices or factories somewhere on the countryside where there's very bad public transport. Everybody goes there with their cars to work with their cars, and you have these huge parking lots, and the companies don't like that, right? So, for example, they do the commuting for one of the large airports here in London. There's not much space around the airports, but there's lots of employees that need to come there, and they often come from the countryside. So it's very bad for them to come with public transport. Yeah? So then COVID hits, all these commuting things, all these sort of ad hoc bus trips to festivals or concerts or things, all of that died away. So Zelo's revenues pretty much go to zero from one moment to the next. And but then a week later, they had more than before, because they called up the Amazons of this world, all the e-commerce players that had massively increased business and needed many more employees in their warehouses. And the warehouses are typically a bit more in the countryside. So it's the same problem, that you have to get lots of employees to these places. And so Zelo then started organizing that. And that's boosted the company a lot. So it's been growing now faster than before by moving into that new opportunity.
Wow, that's good. I really love this kind of innovative stories. Again, the business model is the same, but the target audience are different. That's great. That's a great story to share with our audience. Thank you, Orne, for that. I hope you have a steady power. We don't lose people. Thank you. Sajid, again, I have the same question. A portfolio company of yours which just amazed you because they quickly moved in light of the pandemic.
So I have invested in a couple of ride-sharing companies across the world, in Latin and other places. And of course, during this time, whole ride-sharing has gone down almost to zero and a halt. So, the natural pivot was to go big on deliveries. So they started very quickly aligning with the e-commerce companies and started, taking the delivery on a big time. So that helped them sustain or cover some of the revenue gaps that were coming from that. So, so that would be one. The other would be, like the companies I was mentioning. So companies which were probably doing the typical video consultations and stuff that the way we are doing now. Now, of course, so these companies, what they did is they found that the space is too crowded, and they went into not a pivot, but an extension of products, i.e. increasing the conference and others coming in as part of the whole package. So that's one. A lot of health companies I've seen, who basically runs clinics and others, they found that, people are not coming to clinics. And so that was a big challenge. So they brought in digital health as a big portion of their offering and pivoted to there because they already have the doctors panel with them. So it was more adding the layer of consultation over phone or video stuff. So that's the other company. So, so there are many examples of different companies, not completely pivoting, but essentially keeping the core. And that's one of the questions we ask as an investor is, are they compromising the core or not? If are they going in a business which is so different that if the COVID-19 problem is resolved and life goes back to somewhat older way, can they sustain, So so these companies did not compromise the core, but they added products or services or pivoted to a certain extent to keep their revenue continuing.
Sajid, you touched upon a very, very key point. I mean, again, we all have to be positive and optimistic about future. Post this pandemic, if we go back to the old days, I mean, are these startups of the portfolio you hold, are they able to hold back onto the core of what you had initially invested on? That's a very, very key point and valid point. Thank you so much for sharing that. Now we've come to a time where I would like you speakers to engage yourselves, like ask each other questions. Any questions from Orne to anybody else on the panel today? Natasha or Sajid?
Well, I mean, the topic that's close to the topic that's close to my heart is, of course, getting the world to move towards operating in a more sustainable fashion. What we're seeing in Europe is that this is seen as very much a mainstream effort now. The European Union is pushing a lot in that direction. Basically people are trying to make the Paris Accord happen. And what that's creating is a lot of entrepreneurship around that. A lot of new startups coming up in sectors, as I mentioned before, in sectors that maybe are not the obvious ones for sustainability plays. So my question to the other panel members would be, how is that in their regions, given that the economies are, very different structures, very different consumer groups, etc.
Yeah, thank you, Ane. Who wants to take this question first? Sajid or?
So the question I think you're asking is, with the pandemic happening, are we seeing grassroots level innovation? Is that the question, or?
No. So
to meet the...
I'm not. I wasn't looking at the pandemic. I was wondering about sustainability. So environmentally beneficial, innovation. This here it really has hit the mainstream now. In terms of the VCs, in terms of the entrepreneurs, in terms of the startups starting up. So we see many, many more. We see also the government supporting the topic very actively. So within the context of the Paris Accord, getting CO2 down, all of that. So how do you feel that topic is positioned in your regions? In terms of the entrepreneurs, the VCs, the governments, do you feel momentum in that area in the recent couple of years, or do you feel this is rather a secondary topic to some of maybe the more urgent, pressing topics?
Sure. So I think there are two angles to it, right? So if you look at a broader picture, not only probably to some extent in Europe, but US and other markets, what you see is, economy is coming front and center, right? Because, so it's a question of let's get the economy back and then think about all the other things. So I think there is this force that is gaining, especially in US and places like that. But at the same time, there is a very clear LP focus on ESG related companies, and LPs are very clear to fund ensure that the VCs or PEs fund those companies, right? So that forces, I think, is coming together in our markets, in emerging markets where I come from, where we are seeing a lot of VCs have taken fund from the LPs who are quite clear on the ESG goals. So they are, of course, driving the funding of the companies who are this focused. So that is happening. In terms of the government focus, I think government, of course, has it, but I'm sure it varies country by country. It's quite a wide, Asian countries vary so much in terms of income and where they are within different regions. So it will vary differently. But I think in general, in many emerging markets where it's relatively poor, the clear focus is, of course, not so much on environment as such, but really getting the economy back on track. So that is coming, coming at the center.
I think Sajid, you're very right. In terms of Singapore, I would say that I think the first and foremost thing that they did was to get the economy back up by opening up the SMEs back into the business. But obviously, the social distancing measures were taken. All the measures were taken into place. But that was the first goal of our country, to get the economy back to at least some to a milestone where people were losing jobs and the small and medium businesses were suffering. So that was the main goal. Okay, so Natasha, yeah.
I think from a sustainability perspective, it structurally varies from country to country. So if I talk from a pandemic's perspective, sustainability really identified the gaps in our supply chain for food chain, especially in some of the first world countries, right? But in a country like India, which is agrarian economy, right? 16% of our GDP is from agriculture, and we actually produce more than what we require, right? So from our perspective, in terms of food production, food security, so we're not so much focused towards that because that's something which is well catered towards us. But if you look at our economy structurally, right, we are one of the largest importers of energy in the world, right? So the government, so sustainability from that perspective, how do you move towards clean energy, has always been the priority of the government. And we have a really massive and ambitious clean energy targets, which India is moving very successfully towards. I think our policy is around 175 gigawatts of solar power as per the solar mission of the government of India by 2022, right? And at the moment, we are already at 140 gigawatts of solar energy. So these sort of things which are initiated by the government, and these policies are driven from the government perspective, yes, of course. But from an investment standpoint, where I see a lot of VCs increasingly focused towards is towards your electric vehicle, which is the momentum all across the world. The leaders, of course, being US and China. And China, the reason why they moved so aggressively towards that is because it's the largest importers of energy in the world in terms of crude oil, right? So they I think they're the most aggressive in the world in terms of the renewable energy cars, electric cars, which they have. From a global perspective, and it's quite aspirational to be able to emulate that, because if you're talking about moving to transportation to electric from ICE right now, there's a huge amount of infrastructure investment which has to go through, which is a big debate right now. What do you do about the charging station? It has to be localized to the Indian power grids, right? And who's going to do that investment? Is it going to be public, private, or is it going to be a triple P? Public and private partnership collaboration, right? So these sort of things have become important, and there's a huge opportunity from an investment standpoint that a lot of VCs have to focus towards. The first momentum of going electric towards transportation is going to start from public transportation. So that we have seen some big contracts in terms of electric buses being given out at a government level to a couple of private companies in India to move to electric. And the second is going to be, okay, that's the first entry point. The second entry point is towards two-wheelers. India is the largest two-wheeler market in the world, right? So we are seeing increasing amount of companies and even existing two-wheeler companies now get more focused towards their electric vehicle strategy, and they have launched a couple of products around the same. And that's true for cars as well. We are seeing increasing amount of focus being towards electric vehicle and smart cars, as they like to say, internet connected cars. So yeah, I think that so sustainability is very regional in terms of structurally what is of focus towards each of the countries. And I think from India, energy is a primary importance, and there has been a lot of policy initiative from a government perspective to pursue the same. And we're seeing a rising momentum of investors also focused towards such companies.
Yeah, I think I have to add one point, because when the pandemic hit the economy, the first focus of the government was here in Singapore was to just, after a few months, to get the economy back up, by opening up the economy. But now they're trying to build sustainable. They are not trying. They are now focusing on sustainable goals in different areas.
So a lot. This pandemic is really shaking government from a perspective of the food supply chain. Like we need to be able to produce more locally rather than be dependent on international supply chain perspective. Food is the primary thing. So that highlighted the deficit there.
Yeah, for us, for Singapore, it's building the local talent pool, not depending on the external talent.
How? So yeah, it's really made us go back to our supply chain on everything and highlighted our weak points.
Exactly. So does that answer your question, Arne?
Yeah, no, thanks very much.
Yeah. Any other question from any of the panelists or speakers today to anybody else that you might think they would be able to answer, depending on the region they are? Like Sajid is Indonesia, Natasha India, and UK. Arne, UK by covers Europe as well.
I mean, one question I have in general, I always ask this question, nothing to do with where you are, is do you find yourself more productive during these times? And second, of course, is something probably, let's answer that and then we go to the next one if we have time.
Yeah, Natasha, what do you say?
I think work for home is really challenging. So, but everyone's trying to adhere to the new normal. But I think to a point you can work from home, but beyond that, it gets really tough. And if you have to do a lot of teamwork, it's even tougher to coordinate that someone who's not sitting right next to you. That synergy is not there. How do you build your team synergy to be on the same wavelength? Otherwise, everyone is different places. You just talk when you're required to, and it's very disconnected from that perspective and very internal looking. So yeah, like I said, it's to a point where you can be productive, but then it starts getting quite unproductive. So that's my take on it.
Yeah, Arne?
Well, I think one gets more done because one doesn't have to commute to work anymore. But I'm in this job because I like working with people. Venture capital is a people business. You meet new people all the time. And that's really why I'm in this job. And that is suffering, of course. On the other hand, the silver lightning is that you're the same distance from everybody. So you can meet people, if you want, virtually in the same way, whether they're on another continent or they're in the same town. So what it did for us is it made us broaden our network in more distant places. So that's what it did, and in that sense, it actually expanded our reach.
Yeah, I think I have to add on to what both Natasha and Arne said. The human touch, obviously, we are missing it out. We all I'm a salesperson out and out. My job is to be in the field, meet people, network, get the job done. So conferences is where I used to be most of the time, on flights in different countries. But obviously that stopped. So that was a big setback in the beginning. When this started, I had to adjust myself, I had to adjust my mindset, I had to adjust my timings, my work area has to be set up, because it's a totally different world right now when it all started. But gradually with the passing time, when I realized this is not going to change this year. I realized that this is not going to change this year with a lot of information out there. So I had to discipline myself to be productive from the desk I sit. I almost sit here every day. How many hours I've forgotten. I have just lost I can't differentiate between a day and a night or a weekend or a weekday anymore, to be very honest. I have lost that track of all that. I love to sit here and work here. In terms of productivity, I would say productivity has gone up because I don't spend time in commuting. That I used to get tired as well when you commute and everything. Like I was commuting overseas, so like you go on a flight, then go to a hotel. By the time you are back on work, you're tired. So that obviously saves a lot of time and energy for me. Spending time with the family. I mean, this has made me more productive because family is around me. Working around them is something that has made me a very happy person, I would say. That has compensated well because I used to not see them because I used to go overseas most of the time. So, but to Natasha's point, the human touch is obviously not there, which is something I have gotten used to now. So to answer your question, Sajid, yeah, this is me. What was the next question?
I'm not sure whether we have time or not. No, it's okay. I think we go to Natasha if she has any questions.
Yeah, we have time. It's okay.
Okay, no. So the other question I was asking was more about for your individual in Europe and in India. This whole the point that you're making about with this coronavirus thing, life going back. So do you see as economy starts opening up or country starts opening up, are people spending more? Do you see, there's this hypothesis that's going on that, because a lot of people didn't spend for a while, right? So because people spend a lot of time traveling and eating out and all those stuff. So the pent up, so this K recovery, right, which is the latest series. So there's two group of people who are actually getting richer and who will continue to be, so it's a K recovery that we're looking at in the current scenario. So on the upper end, we have a group of people who has now quite a bit of savings and spending. Do you see that reflecting in your economy? Or do you see that sort of like spike? Just probably a cursory glance or whatever.
Natasha, do you want to take that first?
Yeah, sure. So I think there are two answers to that. So that sort of people, that class of people which you're saying, is getting richer despite everything. It doesn't really matter what's happening, whether it's the pandemic. That's very limited. That's the 1%, and but for the remaining 99, right? If someone, I think you mentioned that we are seeing at an all-time high of usage of e-commerce platforms. But though the volumes have increased phenomenally, but if you look at the average unit transaction value, right, that's gone tremendously down. And that's because people are just buying what they need. They're not, that discretionary income is sort of being saved away because it's really uncertain time. You really don't know what's going to happen, how long this is going to continue. What if something happens to me? I have to go to a hospital. Am I covered by this insurance, or will they take up my insurance or not? So people are really saving up for that. And I think though there is a class of people which thankfully have their jobs in place and are working from home, and they're sticking with the strategy of just ordering or living by what's required from a day-to-day perspective, which is really not much spending. So everyone is saving quite a bit or holding back on doing any investments. And it's a wait and watch till you feel that things have gone back to normal, like it is in China, where they're not even wearing masks and going out in public, So once we get to that phase, then we'll see that spike which will happen. But in general, for everyone, a lot of people have lost their jobs, so it's really bad for them. But still, like, I don't think we'll see that upsurge in spending till the time we feel that everything has actually gone back to normal and where we are.
Yeah, totally.
Which is a while from now. I wish we were like China and just go back to normal within 2-3 months.
But that case has gone up again back in Hong Kong after the thing, so it's a third wave, or what wave they've just faced it. So we don't know when it's going to get normal. But so to answer Sajid's question, what do you have to say?
Well, I'm not an economist, so I don't really know what's going on. My expectation is that people will spend on the necessary, but not the discretionary in these times. That's the normal behavior. And yeah, there's certainly a K-shaped thing going on. I see it among my friends that people who are in e-commerce and so on, they're making more money than they ever did. We see that in our portfolio as well. We invested just briefly before the lockdown. We invested in a company that does last mile delivery logistics and so on for e-commerce. A month after we invested, they were much larger than they were before. So some people are really on the winning side, and they may then spend this more, of course, if they have more money. But I think we're just seeing a restructuring of the economy at large, and a lot of these effects will be permanent. And so the economy will look very different when it comes to retail, e-commerce, but also when it comes to cities, city centers. They're not going to go back to where they were before and so on. So my expectation is that we will have quite a different world. But from a sustainability angle, I think it will be a more sustainable world. So I think there will be some good coming out of this generally very bad episode.
Yeah. Thank you, Arne. Thank you. As you rightly said, I'm also not an economist, but the thing is, I think this is going to bring a more balance between the wealthy and not so wealthy. I think that, we're probably going to build a more sustainable world where there is not much difference between the really rich people and the really, not so rich. That's what I foresee. I'm not an economist, but I'm very hopeful and positive. That's my 2 cents.
I want to ask one question to the panelists. So, what is the change which you feel because of this pandemic? It's from your own reflection, how that has really changed the way you have been looking at investments or looking at companies differently. So, what is that thing which has added something to your learning from this pandemic, and you will really take forward for the rest of your investing career?
I mean, for me personally, I think the whole notion of growth at any cost, it's getting back. So it's not going to be the main theme in the investments going forward. I think most of the investors are now realizing, when people say this is not a black swan, though, but it is such a significant impact on everything. So the sooner the companies become sustainable, the better. So that will happen.
Is Sajid breaking up, or is it me?
I think I could hear him earlier, but not now.
Okay, I think he's frozen. Oni, you like to take that question from Natasha?
Well, I mean, what the pandemic has proven is that what everybody knew already before, of course, that very resilient business models are a great thing. So software as a service companies, for example, that have recurring revenue with very, very high margins, they by and large, they just weathered the storm without much of a hiccup. Digital marketplaces, vertical marketplaces that operate on very low margins and non-recurring revenues, they have suffered badly. And those are, of course, the ones that Sajid just mentioned. Those are the sort of growth at all costs type of companies that in the past years sucked up lots of money to just grow. And so those models have proven to be very fragile. And we're seeing that software as a service is being valued very highly at the moment, whereas these digital marketplaces are not. So I think in terms of valuation, you see the market responding to that new insight, if you want.
So one very basic thing. So because of this pandemic, everyone has sort of see a zigzag performance with their top line because of lockdown or one other factor, which is of their business, which has been affected because of the pandemic. So in this sort of a situation, how has the way in which you value companies differed really? So Arne, you mentioned that you have made investments during this time of the pandemic. So when companies have seen this sort of a fluctuation, do you just sort of negate it if things have gone back to normal, or do you sort of discount it by X percentage, or how that has shifted your perception on valuations altogether? Or go on the last round or do a slide down round? What's the sort of rule of thumb which you typically apply?
mean, you would not value the company necessarily on the last 6 months. You would value it on the next 12 months or the last 24 months. So you have to be very careful when you look at the last 6 months. But it's not, at least in our space, it's not necessarily the case that all these companies went up and down or down and up. So, for example, we have a whole number of companies that sell software into the electric utility industry. They've just been doing fine. In fact, it's rather been accelerating for them. So they had no impact whatsoever. I mentioned the data center industry before. That's been doing extremely well. But even industries where you would think that you get the impact, if you're a digital player, modern player, you may actually see quite a different effect. So we have a company that helps people move house, basically. It's a digital platform for organizing your house move and getting your furniture transported and all that. Different from their competitors, they didn't see the down and up. They more or less cruised through all this. And that's because with the pandemic, their approach of doing everything digital became much more popular. So all of a sudden, when you were moving house, you didn't want someone to come to your house anymore and look at your furniture. You rather wanted to do that digital and online. And that's exactly what this company was offering. So we see even in that part of the portfolio, we saw that if you have an innovative digital approach, you could do quite well, because really the pandemic has accelerated the digitalization of society.
Interesting.
Yeah. So Sajid, would you like to take Natasha's question in terms of evaluation?
So we, because the stage that we invest, a lot of these are very early revenue, or some of them are just so. In our case, I mean, just for example, we recently invested in a company called Trail out of India. So they're doing this Pinterest for India at the Series A. So that was their monetization was early, but because of the sort of TikTok ban, their usage rates is going up. So so you use those other parameters depending on the company. Some companies, of course, I mean, some companies are seeing a boom of revenue, so those will be relatively straightforward. Some companies which has seen a significant drop in revenue, there are some haircuts. So I'm seeing down round to 30-40% down round from the last valuation in some companies like that.
Right. Okay, good to have different perspectives from Arne and Sajid. Thank you both. I mean, Natasha, hopefully it has answered your question with the two different perspectives, for sure. So just one final question before we close the show. Are you guys looking to invest? Because with LATOKEN, so our mission, our goal is to connect great startups with investors like yourself, right? So we have a big community of startups and founders that we can connect with you through our platform. So your profiles are now up on our website. So Arne, Natasha, Sajid, I mean, you can just go and look yourself on our website, and you are all featured as investors. So are you currently open to invest into startups in the next year, this year? I'm sure you are.
Where will we go? It's our job.
Absolutely, I wanted to hear that only. Thank you, Natasha. I had to ask this question, sorry. So same with Arne, I guess, and same with Sajid as well. I'm not guess, but I'm sure. So we have a big pool of talent, founders, startups, and so I think they are going to reach out to you soon and make some connections. And who knows, you might end up investing in them in future.
Sure.
So that brings us to the end of the show. I really enjoyed the show. This has been the most productive, I think, show of the week. This is Friday, end of the week, and I can whatever I can remember from this has been the most productive session so far, with people from UK, India, and Indonesia, and Singapore. And my colleagues have done a fabulous job, still there, hanging on from Singapore and Moscow. Thank you, everybody. So we host the shows Monday to Friday. We try to make it very engaging and interesting with different variety of topics. You can check us out on www.latoken.com/events. And all our events are getting featured over there. Choose a topic that is of interest to you. Please feel free to ping me on WhatsApp. If something actually is fascinating, and you would like to contribute in terms of speaking and sharing your ideas and experience, we always look forward to have you again on a panel just like Natasha. She is, I mean, she's got not only energy, but she's got a lot of information to share as well. That's why we bring her back all the time. Thank you, Natasha, being, such a part of our family as well. So thank you. That brings us to the end of the show. Thank you. I would like to say thanks and happy Friday again. Have a great weekend. But please wash your hands, wear the mask, stay safe is very important. Take care of your health is very important. Things are going to go back to normal. Hopefully, we are all hopeful, but please stay safe right now and let's stay connected. Yeah, that's it. I mean, have a great weekend and bye.
Thank you. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.